Hello, good evening, and welcome to our Louise self-healing class. This is our personal self-healing class where we teach ourselves how to take care of ourselves. So it's a beautiful evening here in New York City, and we are 204 West 84th Street, and it's always a pleasure to have all of you on the call with us, and we have a number of people, new faces with us at the center here, and we're so happy to see new faces. You're all welcome. Before we go into our program for today and our lesson for today, we'd like to start with an affirmative prayer. I accept myself as a forward-moving action of spirit. I am divine center of the loving action of God that flows forth in this season. I am divinely supported, sustained, and maintained by the one power and presence. I realize that as I am true to myself, I am true to life. I allow spirit to move me beyond my boundaries into a great new adventure of life. Today, I move forward in an expanded spiritual integrity, knowing that the principle of life supports me in all my endeavors. I celebrate life moment by moment and experience joy, peace, and love. And so it is. Thank you once more for joining us for today's class. And I'd like to invite Anthony Jackson for another reading, and watch one video clip before we invite Dr. Greg for the lesson today. Anthony Jackson. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Welcome the audience and those that are there on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. Okay, so the reading from today is going to be from Louise Hay. Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life. And this particular one is chapter 9. And it's about daily work, which is a question I asked you earlier. I enjoy practicing my new mental skills. If children gave up when they fell for the first time, they would never learn to walk. Like any other new thing we're learning, it takes practice. It's a part of life. It's what we do. First, there's a lot of concentration, and then it gets easier. Some people like to call it hard work. However, I don't think it as hard work. I think it as something new to learn, and I do. Say to yourself out loud, I am doing the best I can. And some of the different ways that we can reinforce our learning is that you can express gratitude, writing in for affirmations, singing meditations, enjoy exercising, practicing good nutrition. These are all methods of reinforcing your learning, doing affirmations out loud. And of course, there's always the mirror work. Singing affirmations, taking time for relaxation, exercising, reading and studying, also visualization and mental imagery. So these are some of the ways that we can actually move into reinforcing our learning. And now we're going to have the video clip. Is that correct, Anthony? All right, good deal. Thank you.
See what you have and they have, and you see what you don't have. And there's a sense of I'm better or I'm not good enough. And all that starts happening. And unknowingly you were buying into that. And invariably you came up to the place where there was something missing, something wrong with you. And depending upon your circumstances, you might even have a sense of shame about who you are and who your family is and what they possess and what they don't have. So in comes shame and then we have a sense of justice and injustice and right and wrong, and all of that stuff happens to us along the way. And if you're steeped in religion, you might think some of the things that you've done are unforgivable. After all, many of the faiths would say you were born in sin, original sin. And so all this stuff is being heaped on young people. My consciousness can be thought of as my awareness. All that I'm consciously aware of, and a lot of what I'm not consciously aware of, the things that are in my subconscious, the sum total of my knowing, you might describe as your consciousness. And the thing to understand is that it's playing out in your life. The sum total of your knowing is being reflected everywhere in your life's experience. So we do our work in consciousness, we do our work in mind. Probably when you were younger, you believed in some type of a higher power, a God. And if you prayed, you were usually praying in your mind to a God that was elsewhere, usually most people above. And generally it was a big being, a big guy probably, in the skies, in the heavens. Maybe you prayed a lot and hoped your prayers would be answered. You hoped that whatever it was would solve things for you, fix things. You hoped that whatever it was that was outside of you would fix things, would fix you. Maybe it would even save you or fix any situation that you were troubled about. Whatever the higher power was, for most part, as we think of it, it was elsewhere. It was outside of ourselves. And if you're like me, I became impatient. I was always praying. I was a good Catholic boy. I was an altar boy. I was praying. I went to Mass every day. It didn't seem to respond in time for me. I became impatient. And when you were younger, you might be observing all the things that happen in life that you wouldn't think that whatever power it was, you wouldn't think it was fair, because you would see lots of things happening for people and lots of things happening to people that just didn't seem fair. In the process of all that, many of us have a sense somewhere, you're not born with it. Louise would say you're born as this beautiful child of light, wonder, and your needs are met, and you cry, people tend to you, and you laugh, and the world responds. So somewhere in the process of your entrainment, your growing up, comes in this sense of, I'm not good enough. And there's nothing you can do that will ever make you less valuable to wake up to some essential spiritual truths. You might say to yourself, there's nothing I can do to become more worthy. I am worthy. I can do all things through Spirit, which strengthens me. Of course, that's me paraphrasing it. We can do all things. The Spirit is with us, operating in us and through us. We just have to wake to that realization that we are one with the one. And I'm thinking, we too can develop a consciousness like that, where we can wake up and just say, oh my goodness, I'm alive and I'm awake. And, and we know that life responds to us, which is even better. And we can tune into that consciousness and realize that there is perfection with what is. And we can develop that awareness with each and every waking day. Look to this day, for it is life, the very life of life. In its brief course lies all. The verities and the realities of your existence, the bliss of growth, the glory of action, the splendor of beauty. For yesterday is but a dream, and tomorrow is only a vision. But today, celebrated and well lived, makes every yesterday a dream of happiness and every tomorrow a vision of hope. Are you looking to express life? Are you looking to express life with excitement? Are you looking forward to expressing yourself? Are you ready to use your power? You have power available to you. Ernest Holmes said, greater than you of which you're a part, and you can use it. It's time, unless you have other plans, to start getting excited about the most important person in the world, which hopefully is you. There's no better day than today. So this is the day to leap forward. There's no better time than right now. I won't say that we have wasted time in the past year or so, and I'm certainly not going to say we've lost time, because I'm sure we've all acquired valuable lessons in strength. I'm going to say, though, today is the time for us to begin to live our life more fully, to express ourselves full throttle and with joy and happiness, knowing that all of life is supporting you. Our teaching always teaches that, by the way. You have the universe giving us all these green lights now. I could see it and feel it yesterday in the streets of New York, I promise you. It's always been wooing you and urging you to step forward and express life in a greater way. This life that you're living right now is not a dress rehearsal. It's it. So please stop waiting around for your man to come, the job to come. You have to be the initiator of the greatness in your life. You've got to put a demand on consciousness yourself for fuller expression. If you're wishing and hoping, it just doesn't work that way. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to First Center for Spiritual Living and our self-healing class. I'm Greg. I've been teaching this class now for a long time. I want to welcome the people who are on the Zoom call. I can see some of your faces, and I'm told that we have Carla and Cindy with us, and John, and some people in the building, which is really great. We're inviting people back to get plugged in and come to the building if you're here in New York. I also want to do a shout out to people who are watching us on YouTube for the first time, Instagram, Facebook, and however and wherever else you may encounter us. I'm looking around and I'm assuming everyone's read the book, You Can Heal Your Life. Is that correct? I do have a yes and a yes and a yes. Okay. That book was written by Louise Hay. And most of you will know who she is. She's the reason I teach this class, actually. The book, You Can Heal Your Life, has sold over 65 million copies and translated into many languages. With Louise Hay, she was introducing healing techniques, a positive philosophy. With her, many millions have learned how to create more of what they want in their lives, including greater sense of wellness in their bodies, physical healings, healing their minds, their spirits, and she taught people how to live with positive expectancy. Louise Hay's philosophy was formed right here in our center in New York City. We used to be called the First Church of Religious Science. We're now the First Center for Spiritual Living. We're the very same organization that was founded, I think it was in the late 40s. But a little bit more about who we are and who Louise was and why her book was so important and how it's still relevant and important. Louise Hay grew up, I won't say she was impoverished, but she wasn't living in the lap of luxury by any means, and she had an unstable home. And her life was, had a lot of struggles. She had a marriage that was unsuccessful. It turned into a bad marriage, and she had a lot of personal struggles that wouldn't be different than most people you would talk to. It's she found herself coming into this center, our church, when we were located on 48th Street in the year 1970. And again, it was the first church then, not First Center. Louise Hay took classes here and she learned about consciousness. She learned about the very things that we teach. And she was a part of our ministerial program. She was a popular member of the congregation. Everybody loved her, and she was always full of excitement. And she started writing this little blue book, which was about heal your body. It didn't take too long before who she was and the work she was doing started to get noticed, and people wanted her to go speak in different centers and places. She had started working with different clients. Like on our call tonight, we have a Reverend Judith and Reverend Robert. Like they would work with helping someone and teaching them how to do affirmative prayer. Louise Hay too, she was doing affirmative prayer, personal work with other people. And she was a little bit ahead of the time because she started chronicling her, not the personal details, but if she met you and she saw a certain thing that was going on, her experience, what came up for her, she would write it into her little journal. And after she was doing that for a period of time, she developed a little reference guide that detailed her impressions. Like if I sit with you and I listen to you and I can see, obviously, I intuitively pick up that you're not feeling good about yourself and all of that. Then I might jot down, okay, the person is, right? And it's not what you call like, it's not like a medical journal, but or medical dictionary, but she had a list of things that she observed. So I kind of smile at it sometimes because I've been a part of this work for over 30 years, and people will read her little booklet like it's a, I don't know, a doctor's manual or something. It was simply her subjective impressions that she was picking up when she was working with people. It wasn't her intention to have it be anything other than that. When Louise began to do the work in consciousness, which is what we always do here, she then, after she had all these subjective impressions, she would list also positive new thought patterns that people could use. And she used them for herself in her own healing work. And that list has been passed on in several writings. Again, what's important to know in healing work, all of us are dealing with our own consciousness. Okay, so if I'm working on self-healing with me, I'm working with my own consciousness. If I'm working, on behalf of others, I'm still working with my consciousness. I'm getting clear and clear and clear and clear. So we want to find the language that works for us. So Louise Hay's book was really wonderful, but you look at her work and you'd still want to be finding language that works for you to change the patterns within yourself. Anything that might be negative, you'd be looking for language that could turn a negative thought around. When Louise was here at the center, again, First Church at the time, the book, You Can Heal Your Body, was put together. And I've heard all kinds of stories about that little book. It was affectionately called the Little Blue Book. I saw it, it was just like a little thing. Nobody thought it was going to become anything, especially our former pastors. But it was the beginning of great things, right? Who could have ever known that this young woman with her little blue book could wind up owning a publishing empire and putting forth author after author after author after author. But it was the beginning of great things, and she was here at First Church, and she really did an awful lot for the entire New Thought movement, giving a place for all these wonderful writers to find a home to publish their work. Louise Hay would oftentimes say throughout her life, and I've quoted it thousands of times by now myself in my workshops, she would say, it's all very simple. And, you'll hear that phrase so many times. And she's talking about the law and the use of the law and improving your life. It's all very simple. Now, nowhere ever did I ever hear her say it's all very easy, but I've heard her say it's all very simple. And it is, of course. And she was talking about the law. And she was saying, essentially what I would say every week here, that life is responding to you endlessly. It responds to you and your consciousness. And that every experience that you have, if you really are working it right, you're going to understand it's about consciousness. Louise knew that not everybody was there yet. What do I mean by there? Not everybody is in consciousness to a place where they know I'm creating my own life. That isn't the way most of the people will live their lives. It just isn't. And her healing approach was so very simple because she was working with universal love and its laws. These are laws that she didn't create. Raymond Charles Barker, our founder, didn't create these laws. I know Socrates was talking about this in the days of the pre-Socratics. It goes back. There's nothing new about new thought. You know, we would teach you here that everything exists in this energy called love, and it responds, life responds to you by law. So people began asking Louise to speak all over the country, right? She was the hot thing, right? So she started traveling around wherever she could to spiritual centers and doing workshops, lecturing and facilitating them. And basically the theme would always be some version of loving ourselves more and healing our lives, changing the conversation around. During the 70s, Louise found herself with a challenge with her own health. And it was a cancer challenge, as I recall. And so at this point, she had a lot of good training and information, and she was learning about nutrition. She was learning about healing and consciousness. And she was wide open to different ideas. So she chose to deal with her illness in non-traditional ways. Of course, that scares a lot of people, just the thought of not following the doctor's advice. But in her case, she was using both the physicians, because she realized God is in the doctors too. She was using the physicians, the medicines, but she was definitely using spiritual mind treatment, affirmative prayer. And she knew that the real power was in mind, in her own mind. I remember so well her saying, you know, you can keep having surgeries and having things removed. She says, but unless you get at the pattern of thought within, you know, you're going to keep, you can only go through so many of these surgeries. And so she turned out being very successful in healing her body and practicing what she was teaching and preaching. She was really, I remember in the 90s, everybody was studying in my world the mind-body connection, and she was doing this before a lot of these folks. She knew that the mind definitely can impact the body and create health and a sense of wellness, wholeness, or it could do the exact opposite. The mind can draw into your world everything that represents dis-ease. So later, Louise Hay would outline her whole philosophy, which is really a condensation and simplification of what we teach in the science of mind. And she would say, everybody's 100% responsible for the things that they're bringing into their experience. And I know that's true. I didn't always like hearing it. And I'm always careful when I say that. When we say we're each 100% responsible for what's going on in our lives, it isn't to suggest that anybody's wrong or anybody's to blame for anything. It's just, this is where you are. This is what you know. And what you know either attracts this or that, or, so it's a question of consciousness. It's never a question of blame, right? So I'm careful to say there's no blame to this statement intended. What Louise was trying to get at is that we bring to every situation, we bring it all into our lives. All situations come to us by means of consciousness. And ultimately, everything that's going on is an opportunity for healing and spiritual growth. In the early 80s, Louise Hay moved to California from New York, and she had all this workshop experience, and she began, putting all her material together, and she started writing. She wrote about what it was to be a practitioner, what it was to practice the teaching. She wrote about the experiences she was having with all the people she had counseled and done prayer work for, both here in New York and in the workshops afterwards. Louise had a real powerful message, especially because she had successfully dealt with her own medical history, a few years before. In 1984, she wrote the book, You Can Heal Your Life. Usually I have a copy here, but it doesn't matter. So that book was published in 1984, and in it she explains how our beliefs and ideas about ourselves are often the cause of our emotional problems and our physical maladies. How we invite disease. I mean, not consciously, like I want to get sick, but our thinking and our thoughts, and how we focus on the problems and physical maladies, how we, not on the conscious level, but on a subconscious level, you're inviting dis-ease, and how we can use tools that we teach here to create wholeness and health. And she showed us how we can heal in every area of our life. Louise Hay, as well as anyone, knew that we do our work in consciousness. She was really clear about that. We do our work in consciousness. She definitely would work with medical providers, as I said before, the same way most of us would today. But she strongly understood that she was the author of her own life, that she was writing the script. So she would not be a person that's going to have the doctor be the authority. The doctor might be an advisor and one of several. Like any intelligent person, you seek good information. And then ultimately, she would know that she is the one who's going to make the decisions. From that book, she said, all healing is self-healing. So for the past 20, 30 years, I've been teaching this, and the idea of all healing is self-healing. The question I will ask every Thursday night, and I've done for so many years, is what is the inner dialogue that you're having? Louise asked that question in so many ways, and I ask it every Thursday night. I'm trying to get people to really consider practice becoming more mindful. My generation, there used to be a song, What Condition Is My Condition? And it's kind of like tuning in and just monitoring and just noticing, what's it like being you all day long? What is that inner chitter chatter? What is that about? Is it life-giving? Is it wonderful? Are you self-correcting all the time? As soon as you go to, as soon as you go and say something negative about yourself, pay attention to that stuff. Become mindful, because it's really valuable to start turning that around and to begin, wherever you do it, stop in the name of love. We play with the way we do it. Tell yourself next. Tell yourself cancel. Replace whatever. The suggestion is for you to replace whatever it is that you're spinning that's negative, and practice neutralizing that type of thought and activity. If you get more involved in new thought and you learn how to do affirmative prayer powerfully, it will become a spiritual practice where you will neutralize any and all ideas that are not life-giving. And you'll always be replacing them with the ideas of truth. Say there's factual stuff that happens, and then there's, you could say, okay, well, my bank account is this, my physical situation is that. These are facts, right? But they're not necessarily the truth of you at all. I used to teach a class, I had the same number. Wells Fargo said my balance is negative $14.23. So I'm using that example for 20 years. And I could conclude from that statement that I have a problem, that I am broke, and I could tell myself a whole bunch of stuff, and all that stuff would not be true. The truth of it is I'm an inlet and outlet of God activity. I'm one with Source. I'm an individualization of Source, and everything that it has is mine. And if you're operating from being plugged in and you're knowing who and what you are, then you're operating from truth, and it's a very powerful place. So the healing, all healing is self-healing. So that means all these conversations that we have with the most important person in the world, which is us, we want to alter them. We want to be really willing to embrace the bigger idea. So I throw out this question: what is it that you've been saying to yourself lately? What's that inner dialogue been like hour by hour today and yesterday and this week? Try to just think about that, because that is the dialogue that's creative, and it's what is creating your todays and tomorrows. So here in this class, and what we do on in our services on Sunday is we gather anytime. We're trying to become more mindful and more willing to do the work. We're not out there trying to save the world, because we know there's plenty of work to be done where. Because here's the thing, when you really work with yourself, you're going to find how the world is doing pretty well on, this is always going to be an inside job. This is the most important conversation you're ever going to be having, which is the one you have with yourself. The book, You Can Heal Your Life, hit the New York Times bestseller list twice. It was on there for 13 consecutive weeks as number one, and it did it another time. 10 years later, I think she was on Oprah, and it shot up another time. And I think last I heard that there was 66 million copies of the book sold in 28 languages. And then there's an equal amount of the audio that's been out there. I mean, her voice is, you could literally say it's changed the world, because it's changed a lot of people. Probably more than anybody we've known in modern times. This past year, we've been dealing with a pandemic. As everybody here knows, we've all been impacted by it in different ways. And for many people have been sick. It was a scary time for many people. I recall the 1980s, there was a pandemic, and that pandemic was AIDS. And it was called the new cancer. It was initially thought to be just a gay thing. And then I was working as a therapist with people with AIDS in those years. And very soon we discovered it wasn't a gay thing, it was a thing. And it didn't care what religion you are, or what color you are, or what socioeconomic background you came from. And it was impacting American cities very quickly and then globally. And there was no treatment at all for many years. At this time, Louise Hay started her famous support group, which in those days was called the Hayride, where she very openly at a time where nobody wanted to talk about that, where if you go into a restaurant, if you're trying to take care of somebody who's sick, you're just treated like you were one of the untouchables. But she openly was sharing about it. And then she wrote a book called, I think it was called The Positive Approach. But anyway, hundreds of people were gathering every week, and everybody started doing their own self-healing work. It's kind of a new concept. They're, instead of looking to be healed, they start working on self-healing. And they're using her book as the basis of the discussions. And at that time I started a group. No, I didn't start a group. I took a group over that had started at Unity in Miami, and the teacher was moving to Tampa and asked me to take it over. And so that's how it all happened for me since 1986 till now. People came in to my group, Louise Hay's group, and probably every group in the nation with their healing needs. It wasn't just HIV either. It was everything. And people came in, they liked what she was, teaching. So I remember having women who lost their husband, or people experiencing divorces or whatever. One thing I learned through my journey, and same thing Louise Hay has spoken of, is the problem that people are coming in with, or the problems that people have, they think it's about one thing, but oftentimes it's something else. Louise Hay said that, I've been listening to people for, hundreds of people, thousands of people, and a lot of different problems, but she'll say the bottom line is I speak to any and all. is there's a sense that there's something wrong with me, or there's something missing, or that I'm not okay in some way. I'm not smart enough. I'm too something, too old, too fat, we got this really critical thing that goes on in terms of internal messaging that we acquire along the way of being kids and we're growing up, right? So what we do is we come together in a place like this and we begin to learn how to embrace more powerful messages of self-acceptance and self-approval. And, that phrase, self-acceptance and self-approval in the now. Now, starting here right now today, self-acceptance, self-approval in the now are the keys to all positive changes. So I recall fondly facilitating all those groups for all those years, and I can echo, or if not verbatim, repeat all of her messages word by word now. People were coming to healing centers within a couple of years after, all over the country. And generally when people come in, there's some type of complaint in their life. And one thing I have to put forward in these classes, it's good. They come in and no one likes to see someone suffering, but people come in and they're hurting or they're trying to figure something out, right? They might be worried about their children. They might be worried about their spouse, their girlfriend, boyfriend. They talk about what's wrong and they talk about what's missing. And oftentimes they talk about what's wrong with somebody else when they come into our groups. And so you got to be careful when you say we're each 100% responsible, because that's not what they want to hear. They want to be soothed and cared for and want us to make it go away. At least that's a lot of people. And we know that we can't take that away. We can really do something better. We can teach them how to heal their life and give them tools so they can ascend and level up, and we can show them, and we can still teach what Louise was teaching. We can teach people how to love their lives and how to have everything get much better. So some of the things I've learned from all this teaching for the past 30 years is the same thing that Louise Hay concluded. The problems that people are talking about, the things that people are complaining about, are rarely the real problem. Generally speaking, most people, your average person, is what I call very much other referred. No, I got this after Louise. I got this in a good therapy group about 15 years after Louise. What does that mean? Other referred. Can you imagine? Most of the world is other referred rather than self-referred. Bet some of you can think of that. I'll give you a few examples. And it's okay if you're other referred, but this was a big lesson for me when I started to get my head around this. You might be worried to death about what your boyfriend or girlfriend is doing, where they're going. Or you might be completely obsessed or somewhat obsessed with what one of your children or grandchildren are doing. You don't have any peace because you're just all worried about these other people. Or you might have trust issues. You might not trust them. And so you're all like, I don't trust, and I'm this, and I'm worried, and I'm that. I don't have any inner peace. And am I the only one that's ever had a troubled relationship? Because if you've ever had one or two of them, you're all caught up in what your partner is doing and all of that, right? Whether they're good and whether they're true and whether they're faithful or whether they're not, and all those types of things. And then you're caught up in thinking what they ought to do or what they ought to do for you. And you're all caught up in wishing other people would change, and you're deriving your sense of happiness or lack of from what other people are doing and not doing. Well, if you're doing any of that stuff, you will find that you fit into that category of being a little bit other referred, right? So you're a little bit overly focused on other people. And you could argue, but I love them and I care for them. And you could defend your position And that's okay, right? The important point here is just to start to notice if you're doing a lot of that, right? Because if you're doing a lot of that, you're going to quickly conclude that you're giving your well-being away. You know, you begin to see that you are giving away your own peace, you're giving away your own contentment, and you're giving away your own joy. And people do it all the time in so many ways. I could just think of a few examples for this evening. But wherever I'm giving all my attention and focus, and wherever I'm worried and upset, it's kind of like, here I am, this child of God, but I've forgotten who I am. Here I am, this child of God, and I've forgotten how to trust. Here I am, this child of God, and I forget that all is well. Louise would say, it's all very simple and all is well, but I forget. And Louise would say, that's the game we play, you know, remembering and forgetting. When you're plugged in, you remember who you are, and you know that you're supported by the universe itself, and that you are in fact a point of awareness within it, and you're plugged in and you remember, and then you're at peace, and you'll understand that whatever it is that's supporting and sustaining you is supporting and sustaining life everywhere. And then you start to let go of all that control drama, and you realize, my goodness gracious, whatever they do, they're going to do. You know, truly, you know, your higher obligation is to love yourself and to be at peace. And your consciousness will rise and rise and rise as you do the work. I've been watching students for over 30 years. The ones who seem to go and grow the most are the ones who just stay in a place. They plug in this group, some group, and just keep it going and keep reminding themselves. And it doesn't require a lot of effort, but it requires just keep remembering. And then becoming mindful of what that chitter chatter is that's going on within you. That's the conversation that matters most. We can call it the healing conversation, where you're becoming mindful and willing to change it. Loads of good books to support these ideas. The Four Agreements is one of the best, because it says you have all these agreements that you've had since you're a little boy or a little girl, and you've adopted and you've accepted them. So maybe now that we're 20, 30, 40, whatever, we could take a look at some of these old rules and agreements, because many of them don't really support the highest and best. Each of us are here to soar and to expand and to grow. So we want to open up those channels in mind so we can. So as I was preparing today, I thought, well, I'm going to throw it out and let you know, if you don't know, that most of the world is other referred. And that's all right. But I want this group, who's ever listening today and beyond, or picks it up on YouTube later, to know that you are a source of your own happiness. You are a cause to your own experience. You're the author of your own story, and you're creating all the characters in your life to be something. And that's what you get to do. You're creating your own life. So the person could be a scoundrel this week. It'll be the great love of my life next. It'll be something else the following. And it really will have very little to do with them. It's really going to be about your own consciousness. So we're really here working on minding our own spiritual business, and it's really what we do. I have a couple more examples. A person might be other referred if their source of happiness seems always to be outside themselves. So find ways to find things that you get pleasure out of, and it doesn't have to be like anybody else. You might want to go over to the museum. I haven't been in there in a couple of years. I keep saying I want to go there. You might want to go over to the park. I mean, there's 1,000 things that you might want to do just for you. Ways you give power away. You could be other referred if you're all caught up, you're worried about your health, your money, your bank account, the economy, the rising prices, your community, or you're fearing of what somebody will do to you, what happens when you get older. You're just out of the present. The list can go on and on and on, and it's endless. I remember when I was teaching these workshops, the line, the problems that people are talking about in most cases are not the real problem. So that goes back to what Louise was saying after listening to everybody, that it comes back to some type of inner sense of not being okay and not being good enough. If the conversation that you entertain when you're with yourself all week long is limiting and critical, if you find that you're hypercritical and you find that you're always kind of like going towards the negative, that will produce, like produces like. So if I keep staying with the negative, it will produce, so we get to turn all of that around, starting here, starting now, and you can do this. In our classes in the Science of Mind here, we'll teach you about the power of your word. It's a great idea. We're good with that. You'll hear us say that your word is your wand, okay? But it's really much more than that. It's what lives inside you, whether you express it or not. It's being expressed as you think. So your word is your wand. I think it was Florence Scovel Shinn, if I'm not mistaken, who said, we must learn to be the guardians at the gate of our own consciousness. It's a simple idea. Okay, there's nobody thinking up here except for me. Some people think they have a committee, but really, it's you that decides. The kind of conversation that you have in this inner dialogue definitely is playing out week by week. As within, as I said, so without. So if I'm inwardly like just really negative, how could I expect that I'm going to have like this fabulous life, right? My fabulous life is going to show up when I get my conversation in order. So this is a simple concept, but it's a fact that people fight. I don't know why they fight this one either. I was thinking about this afternoon, so putting the notes together. Your inner conversation plays out, and always playing out. But people fight that. They prefer to blame it on someone else. Why would that be? Okay. Most of the population plays the blame game, and everybody's protesting and blaming, your partners, your parents, there's a lot of blame going on. And it's a very interesting situation to observe, especially if you're a truth student, especially if you're somebody who's learning to practice. I love Edwina Gaines, she's a prosperity teacher, who says, I'm here to see the God or the good or the God. See, if you're learning the teaching, you're learning to see it's here, it's present. So you learn to practice seeing the good that's here. If you're if you're living in this world and you're seeing everybody who's caught up in all protesting and what's wrong and all of that, I remember a line from the Course in Miracles that I love in moments when I hear all this stuff. And the line was, I could see peace instead of any and all of this. Just because they're all doing it doesn't mean that you need to do it. Okay. You can choose to be a center of God activity, which you are. You can choose to align yourself and wake up to the truth. And you could choose to know that you're not impacted or affected by what mass consciousness is doing. You can rise above all of that. There have been a few from every generation who do, that they stay on point and they stay on principle. I remember loving to death Ralph Waldo Emerson when I started reading when I was 18. And they used to say of him, a few from every generation discover the consciousness that was in Ralph Waldo Emerson, because he could have been talking about the very thing we're talking about now then. But we live in a world where people are in a lot of action and reaction. And sadly, we find ourselves in action and reaction. But the good thing for us is that we have a place like this, and we have a book like You Can Heal Your Life, and we have a lot of people like Ernest Holmes and others who gave us a great gift. And the gift that you get here is you have a group of people who come together here to keep reminding you of who you are and the power you possess. And then you learn that the world is unfolding perfectly in consciousness by means of every single person. So we're not here to be worried about the world. We're here to remember the truth about ourselves so we can come from that place, and we will then be lifters in consciousness because we have this tremendous gift. And we, of course, want to keep reminding ourselves of it because we can quickly forget it ourselves. You know, say, oh God, Greg's good today, blah, blah. Well, Greg is good today, but I don't know what I'm going to be 3 hours from now. So it's a practice for everybody. I don't know anybody that's got it down 100%. I know that, and I have observed, because I've been facilitating groups forever, it seems, there's a lot of pointing fingers that go on with human beings, and people are often refusing to think they have anything to do with what's going on over here, right? Or anything to do with anything else, right? And here's an old adage I'll share tonight. If you can spot it, you got it. So you can sit there and judge other people. If you can spot it, if there's something within you that, you know, you've either been through it, you know it, you've experienced it. We're all one together. In truth, there's nothing outside of you ever. So I'm connected with everybody in this room and everyone in the town. And so I can't say it's like, I can observe it, and I can also understand whoever they are, wherever they are, they're doing the best they can with what they know. I get to live in this teaching and understand that the choice will always be with you to come from an elevated, connected place, or to descend into the blame game and all that stuff. How do you get out of that and to live from a more elevated place? Well, the first thing to do is start paying attention to the inner dialogue, because that's the thing. Just start monitoring your own thoughts and start making the corrections, and do so lovingly, not critically. And notice as I'm finger pointing, if I'm pointing fingers, I'm really talking about myself, whether I know it or not, right? Let's see. If you're coming into a workshop like this, you're going to be hearing me remind you of what Louise Hay said 30 years ago. Never, never, never criticize yourself, no matter what. Pay extra attention to the word should and how you use it. In most cases, Louise said it means that, not good enough, not good enough. It's critical, right? And it's often a reflection of what lives within yourself much more than anyone else. And Louise thought it was the worst word in the English language. So, and usually when you're using the word should, it's an expression of judgment in most cases. And you could say something like, I could see peace instead of this. I could love myself more. I can love others more. I can learn to be a cheerleader for myself and a champion for myself and for others. If you just have a native thing, you want to get into the fight, you can, but it's not the enlightened way to go. I'll joke on the Irish because I'm Irish. We used to have an old saying, is this a private fight or can anybody get in? So, if that's where you are, that's where you are. I can't judge it, but, hopefully we've grown from that, right? You can rise as high as you want to, and you can really know that all is well and everyone's doing the best they can. You can become a cheerleader for yourself and others. So we're working towards spiritual realization. The more you get involved here, we'll teach you how to do affirmative prayer, and you'll quiet yourself, and you'll come to know that you live, move, and have your being in this perfect presence, and that it responds to you. And we'll get out of the blame game. Today I was putting my notes together, and I remember from the time I was an altar boy, which seems like 100 years ago, there was a passage in the New Testament from Matthew. It went on to say, you can see a speck in your friend's eye, but you don't seem to be capable of seeing the log that's in your own. And isn't that the truth? So we do our work in mind. You know, we work on ourselves. It's usually a full-time job for most of us. There was a Reverend Bill Cameron in Miami who was one of my first teachers. He was an older guy, probably older than I am now. And he was wonderful. And he was the pastor in the same church where I was teaching the Louise workshops in the 80s. Really one of my favorite people. He told me when he was a young man, he was studying psychology and he was fascinated with it. And he was really fascinated with abnormal psychology. And he didn't need a diagnostic statistic manual to know what was wrong with people. He could tell you, talking to somebody 5 minutes, he knew everything that was wrong with these and how to define it and categorize it. And he got really good at it, right? He said he became so well trained in seeing what was wrong and what was missing. And I remember him exclaiming to us, I was a young student, he was all passionate. He said, I got to the point in my career when I was going to become a doctor, have a doctorate in psychology, and I realized I was looking at I was approaching all of life backwards. And he said that was a great discovery, a great epiphany. He realized he was not taking the positive approach that Louise Hay was talking about all those years ago. He realized that he was living his life backwards. So instead of putting all that energy in analysis, and the root word of analysis is to dissect and take apart, instead of doing that, let's start putting our energy and time into seeing what's good, what's possible. Even in people that you think are really, really, acting terribly, right? We want to learn to be the lifters and to see the God, the good in those, and not just those people, all people. If you're coming from that kind of place of connection, and you stop doing what's wrong with me and what's wrong with others, you're going to rise, you're going to ascend. Your consciousness is going to elevate. You're going to be like the crest of the wave, like we're all like part of a wave, but the crest of the wave, because you're going to be one of the ones who can see further. And you'll know that all is well in the world and everyone's evoluting along, doing the best they can. If you want to level up personally, if you want to be a real lifter, it's always going to be about you and your dialogue with the most important person in the world. What you got to know is you. And so ends tonight's lesson, and we're going to open it up in 2 minutes to hear from you guys and you guys, okay? Are you playing something or are we going live? What are you doing?